everyone. Today we are talking about my favorite fictional novels, stories, books that I have, basically. So I'll just talk about which books are my favorite and why. I think this is part two, actually, because I've done this before. So yeah, let's just get into it. Firstly, The Velveteen Rabbit. I actually got this book as a gift from a subscriber because I have an Amazon wish list. So thank you so much. I have always loved The Velveteen Rabbit. I had the book when I was really little, but it wasn't this one. And I also watched the movie too. I don't know what it is, it's just that The Velveteen Rabbit is so nostalgic and sentimental to me. And it's basically about this rabbit who is a plush rabbit. He's a toy rabbit, and he's given as a gift to this child. And the rabbit thinks he's real, but then one day he's like in the garden, and the boy always plays with him and everything, but real rabbits come across the toy bunny and they're like, that's not real. And then the Velveteen Rabbit is like, but I am real. But the rabbits can't hear him because he's not a real rabbit. But eventually the boy ends up getting really sick. There's a part of the book where the boy is crying because he wants to have his rabbit so he could go to sleep with it, because he sleeps with it in his bed. And the mom is like, it's just a toy. And then he's like, it's not a toy. My rabbit's real. The Velveteen Rabbit is all happy now because he's like, I'm real. I'm a real rabbit, you know? Like Pinocchio thinking he's a real boy kind of type of story. And one day the boy gets really, really sick, and it's really, I guess, contagious. So the doctor decides we need to get rid of all of the boy's stuff. Like, you know, there could be germs on things, so throw out everything, including the rabbit. The rabbit is outside crying, and because he actually sheds a real tear from how sad he is, a fairy appears and transforms him into a real rabbit. And even though now he's a real rabbit and he's free and he could live in the forest with other rabbits, he still comes back to the boy's garden in the yard. And the boy, when he's all better again, he's in the yard and he's like, wow, that rabbit looks like my Velveteen Rabbit I used to have. And that, like, made me cry. Because I'm like, that's so sweet how, like, the bunny returned. Like, even though he's real now and he has the freedom to actually move now. He's no longer a toy, like he could be free, and yet he still returns. I think that's so sweet. Speaking of rabbits, I got the complete Peter Rabbit book. I actually got it in one of my vlogs, and I love Peter Rabbit. I really, really do. I have a Peter Rabbit plush, and I just stand Peter Rabbit so hard. I love Peter Rabbit. I think that it's just because of nostalgia, because like one of the earliest memories I could think of is Peter Rabbit. Just this bunny wearing a blue coat, and him living with his siblings and his parents. And, you know, it is a sad story. There is parts of it that are really, really sad, of course. But it's just so nostalgic and so sentimental. So, of course, if I really love it, then why not get the book? So I did. Next up is Black Beauty. This is another book I have just because of, like, nostalgia, sentimental purposes. I do not remember the story really at all because, like, I haven't read it since I was, like, 10. I watch the movies a lot, though, and the story of Black Beauty I think is really sad. Depending on what version you watched, it'll be sad or completely just depressing. I always loved Black Beauty growing up, and now that I'm older, I still have the book I got from my dad when I was really young. This book I've had for such a long time. Like, I only have it because my dad bought me it when I was really little. And although I don't remember the story, it's still a favorite book of mine because, like, the nostalgia. That's really it. Like, even though I forgot everything in it, it's just a memory that I don't want to let go of. Trigger warning for the next book. Perfectly Thin. It is about a girl who has a mental disorder regarding food, and I really liked this book because it was so easy to read. I struggle with focusing so bad, but when I read this, I was like, I understand. 100%. Like, I was able to read it. I never really got bored. Even in chapters where things got repetitive, I still was, like, so intrigued because it was just written so well. I think it's a really good story. I think it's a really good book. When I first got it, I remember I was like, I'm probably not gonna like it because a lot of these books I get sometimes I just don't like because I just don't vibe with it. But this one I really do vibe with. Like, it was so quick to read as well. I finished it in just a few days, which, by the way, mentioning that, I've gotten a lot better at reading, so now I'm reading a lot faster than I used to. Like, I remember in a previous video I mentioned how it could take me anywhere from, like, days to months to finish a book, but now I'm, like, finishing books within, like, overnight. Like, I'm getting so much better at reading. It's really, really great. On vacation, I had nothing to do for like a whole week, and I finished like 4 books in that one week, which 2 of the books I actually finished both in the same day. And I was like, I'm getting better. This is amazing. But moving on, Massive. This book is another trigger warning, but basically it is about this British teenager who has a really, really, really mean mom. Her mom is not loving. Her mom is actually the one who has a problem with food, and it's so toxic. I feel so bad for the daughter, and it's so, so sad. I actually wanted to include this book in the first part I made of this series, but I didn't because, yeah, the daughter is so relatable. You feel for her, you know? It sucks when your parents or parent are just rude to you and vicious to you. They body shame you, they call you names. Like, that's not right. There's a part of the book, too, where the daughter even says, like, don't call me names. Like, stop it. Stop doing that. And the mom says, you are my child. I will do whatever I want to do. And it's just so sad because when you're a kid, you don't really have control over anything. And the character also doesn't really stand up for herself because there's no point. She can't. Like, it's not going to help at all because her mom does not really care about how she affects other people. But I didn't include this book in the last part. Even though I really like this book, I didn't include it because there's evolution in the plot where the character starts to snap. Like, she starts to realize, like, I can't take it anymore, and she starts to bully other people, which I feel like happens to a lot of people, because hurt people will hurt people. However, when she bullies people, she's homophobic. So, I don't support that part at all. Now, I'm pretty sure she was only being homophobic because she was miserable, but that's not an excuse. So, yeah. But anyway, the unofficial Harry Potter spellbook. I really like this book because it literally is just a bunch of Harry Potter spells. And it's, of course, fictional, but that's not going to stop me from using it. Like, there's times where I just, like, be casting spells because I can. And I love this book because it has, like, every spell. But out of this whole list today, I'd have to say that the Velveteen Rabbit's my favorite, Peter Rabbit, as well as Perfectly Thin. I just love Perfectly Thin. It's such a good book. Like, it's so written in a way where you read it, you don't get bored. Like, it just keeps up the pace, you know? It's easy to read, but it's still detailed. And if it gets repetitive, it still is very intriguing. Which I mention repetitive behavior because when you have a mental health problem with food, you tend to be repetitive. So I think it's really, really cool the author is able to write the character being repetitive sometimes and yet still kept it interesting. You know, when I first read it, I was like shocked I was able to stay so focused. It's just written so good. But yeah, that is pretty much it. I will see you guys next week. Bye!